and never give up.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Story Time. Before we get into today's story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and make sure to hit that notification bell. Today's story takes us back to Rendlesham Forest. For those of you who don't know, in the world of the UFO phenomenon, Rendlesham Forest in the United Kingdom is close and almost similar to the incident in Roswell, New Mexico in the United States. It took place in 1980 here in the United Kingdom. However, today's story is very new and very current. It's all about an unnamed retired police officer has come forward recently to reveal his close encounter near Woodbridge in December 1980 at the same time as the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The following story was submitted by the retired police officer via email. However, he still remains anonymous. This is the story of a police officer and a UFO.
Let me take you back to December 26, 1980, a day that would ultimately change and ruin my life forever. It was a bitter, cold night, and as a serving police officer, I was on duty. I was attending to a report of a possible domestic disturbance argument in the town of Woodbridge, located in Suffolk, 7 miles northeast of Ipswich, in the east of England. I was roughly about a quarter of a mile away from Woodbridge when, for no apparent reason, my police radio was suddenly swamped with interference. Static electricity and crackling noises started to emerge from it, so I decided to pull my vehicle over to the side of the road and see if I could figure out what the problem was. No sooner than I had stopped, the vehicle there was an intensely bright flash of green light that lit up the whole interior of my car like a Christmas tree. Not sure what to make of what had just happened, I got out of the car to see if I could possibly figure out what had caused it. Not really expecting to see anything, I was completely shocked to discover a huge green, whitish, glowing, illuminated, phosphorescent, disc, saucer-shaped craft hovering directly above me in the sky. It was an incredible and unbelievably but frightening spectacle to witness. My skin started to tingle and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The saucer was huge, slowly rotating, and was making a quiet, soft, whirring noise. As a police officer, I always carried a polaroid camera in the boot of the police vehicle whenever on driving duties. It's just something that I did. I rushed to the boot and obtained my camera. I fired off 3 shots. I then stood there somewhat shaken and continued to view this object. After what felt like an eternity, but was no more than just over a minute or so, the saucer suddenly, and without warning, soared up high into the night sky at breathtaking and phenomenal speed, and was literally gone and out of sight in a nanosecond. I was left there, standing, thinking to myself, what the hell just happened? 2 of the photos came out of completely fogged and showed absolutely nothing, but luckily one came out almost perfect and showed the saucer in all its glory. I've included that original and untouched Polaroid with my email. The time of my sighting was precisely 1:55 a.m. It really was like something out of a Star Trek movie, to be honest. Words are inadequate to even begin to try and explain just how fantastic and how mind-blowing this encounter was, and the colour of the saucer. It was like no other green I have ever seen. The photo really doesn't do it justice. Don't get me wrong, it's a wonderful Polaroid, but to see that saucer hovering in the sky, and the sheer size of it, and the phenomenal speed at which it departed, the two simply don't compare. It was truly mind-blowing experience that no photograph could ever capture. I had a very difficult time coming to terms with what I had encountered on that December evening. But then in 1980, there was no one to turn to. It's not like it is today. What with the internet and a simple click of a few buttons and you were instantly online, talking to support groups, etc. It just wasn't like that back then. Plus, I never wanted to tell anyone anyway. I mean, would you? And especially being a serving police officer, it simply wasn't an option. So I just filed it away in the back of my mind and tried to get on with my life. That wasn't to be though. Soon after my encounter, I started suffering with anxiety and panic attacks and clinical depression. I suffered terrible and frightening nightmares. Also, it wasn't long before things started to destroy my marriage. I took time off of work, that didn't help. All I did was drink myself into oblivion and sleep all day. Eventually I confided in my wife and decided to seek professional help. I ended up in therapy. I had a psychiatrist. I was on antidepressants. This whole UFO encounter turned my life upside down, and eventually I had to leave the police force on medical grounds, and unfortunately I have never worked another day since. I have suffered with terrible physical and mental health problems ever since this thing happened, and I know for a fact that all my health conditions are a direct result of my encounter with the flying saucer. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, not even my worst enemy. That wasn't the end of it. I also received menacing and threatening telephone calls, even death threats a few weeks after my encounter, and a couple of months later, my home was subjected to an attempted arson attack. My wife believed at the time that this was an attempt by someone to try and destroy my photographic evidence and intimidate me into keeping my mouth shut. It certainly was very unsettling and a frightening time. I can tell you this also. Several days after my encounter, a very good friend of mine, who was a high-ranking senior police officer, told me that he was visited at home by 3 men claiming to be military intelligence. He said he was simply told, in no uncertain terms, that if anyone mentions the word UFO, then simply tell them that they probably saw the lighthouse, and simply tell them it was faulty at the time. He said they gave him other information, but he wouldn't disclose it to me. I also heard quite a few strange tales from members of the public in the months that followed my UFO sighting. None of them were ever reported for fear of ridicule. They may sound far-fetched to most people, but not to me, not after what I saw. One man told me that on the 28th of December at 3 a.m, he was awoken by his dog barking furiously at the back kitchen door. He said he opened the door and there was a small glowing orb. He said the orb shot off and his dog chased after it. Suddenly it went silent, and when he got around the corner of his garden, the orb had fled, and all that was left of his dog was a gooey puddle. He claimed his dog had been vaporized. I asked him if he reported it. He just looked at me and laughed and asked me if I was mad. One woman told me that on the 26th of December at 2:30 a.m, she woke up and found herself in a forest, staring at a glowing pyramid surrounded by several small humanoid entities. Within seconds, she claims she was suddenly back in her bed. I could tell you more incredible stories I heard, and maybe one day, when I have more time, I will. For all those individuals out there who simply think that the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident was nothing more than a flying lighthouse, or can be explained away by some other ridiculous explanation, let me say this. Spare a thought for all those who were caught up in this. It was real. It happened. Fact. End of story. Hopefully one day soon, and especially within my lifetime, I hope that all the information the government have, including photographic evidence, is released and made available to the general public, as we all have the right to know the facts and truth as to what really happened in Rendlesham Forest. I can't mention any names or say too much, but a very trusted source told me that there are still many witnesses to come forward with their evidence. That person also told me that everyone thinks that the visitors were looking for nuclear weapons. They told me that is complete nonsense, and the true explanation is that the visitors had boots on the ground and were doing something in the forest, still yet unknown, and one of their team was captured, killed, bagged and tagged by the military and shipped out to a secret location for analysis and to be studied, and that's the reason the visitors were seen for several days, at one point shining beams of light down as they were obviously looking for one of their own. Makes perfect sense when you think about it. Why would a biologically and technologically advanced race of extraterrestrials capable of interstellar and probably intergalactic space travel be interested in such things? That would be like NASA suddenly releasing a statement expressing an interest in caveman technology. I will leave you all with this thought. Those who speak do not know. Those who know do not speak.
That's the end of today's story time. But we would like to thank the retired police officer here at the Vault for sharing his story with the world and with us. It is worth mentioning that since the retired police officer has come forward, experts have analysed the photograph using the same software and technology that is used by the FBI and the CIA, forensic experts, to analyse evidence. And apparently it's clean as a whistle. Not even one pixel of it has been manipulated, and it is one of the best that they have seen. Something else that has been pointed out by the experts after their analysis is that you can actually see cloud in front of the saucer. And if this is the case, it truly indicates how huge the saucer in the photograph is. We thought we would just update you. Thank you for listening to this week's story time. Join us next time here in the vault. Until then, look after each other and stay safe. Good night.